Uh, In the morning, while my father slept off his hangover, she came upon the scene, crumbs scattered, butter wrapper face down, leaving a greasy spot on the counter. I imagine she felt her throat tighten, anger or maybe a sob. But my mother has a sense of humor when she's angry. My father once tracked her down to win her back after cheating. My mother let him get close as they danced in the hotel bar, and then she bit him hard on the neck, left mark. They got engaged that week. All right, who would pick up for me and read these next two paragraphs? Cris, and then after Cris, Stuart can pick up.
That's really funny. So my mother grabbed a dustpan and swept my father's toast mess into it. She took it back into the bedroom and quietly opened the waistband of his boxers. She tipped the contents, wrapper and all, inside. My parents separated when I was 2 and divorced a few years later. All my life, I've asked my mother why. I knew my father got caught with a town councilman's wife. I knew Danny Monticello didn't know the meaning of moderation. But the answer my mother most consistently gave was, he was a slob. I didn't want to clean up after 2 children.
Okay, Stuart, you want to pick up and read a couple paragraphs?
Because my parents agreed on me, they stitched our broken family back together, and over 30 years of divorce. Through the decades, they talked, laughed on the phone for hours. After she moved into a new house when I was 18, my mother visited my father every Monday to chuck her garbage in the bar's large dumpsters, avoiding the municipal fees, and bum a cigarette. My mother joked that she liked my father just fine when she didn't have to clean up after him. If marriage took place in separate houses, she'd say. So when my father rapidly loses 30 pounds, my mother sits with him and me in the doctor's office as the news is delivered. Metastatic kidney cancer. A divorce is not a marriage, but it is not the opposite of a marriage either. It is not nothing.
All right. Who would like to read the next maybe 3 paragraphs? Natani?
One day near the end, I take my father to the hospital to fill out some standard death paperwork. He gives me power of attorney. He gives my mother permission to receive his medical information. What should I call Ms. Loveland? The nurse asks about the space next to my mother's name. Ex-wife, he says. Then he shakes his head. No, put best friend. A few days later, my mother decides my father's house should be cleaned. She's thinking of nurses, of hospice. She leaves me with him at the bar and drives to his place to get estimates. When she returns an hour later, she is screaming. Keep going? Or?
Yeah, keep going.
Danny, God damn it, the house is destroyed. Only a company specializing in biohazards agreed to take the job and wanted too much money. How, she says, how could you let this happen? My father lowers his head.
Who would like to read the next few paragraphs? Peggy, you interested?
I think I'll pass because I can't see it as well.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, Rev?
Yeah, I'll read. 4 nights later, after some friends gathered to help strip my father's house of filth as best we can, after he walks through the door and hold on a second. There, that's better. It turned it around so I don't have to push it from one side to the other. Gotta find it. Hold on. 4 nights late. Oh God, it's so small. 4 nights later, after some friends gathered to help me strip the house of filth as best we can, after he walks through the door and cries at the sight of clean, he calls my mother's house. His chest, he says. Take 2 nitroglycerin, she tells him. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. She turns to my husband and me. So we rush to meet the ambulance. I ride with my father to the hospital, but he's already dead. Cardiac arrest.
Thanks,
1
Rev.
year later.
Oh, yeah.
1 year later, on Christmas Eve, when I am 9 months pregnant with my own daughter, my mother will call me a little tipsy after a party. Do you think he knew? She'll ask how I really felt. I know the answer. I remember how she screamed at him in the bar, furious that the man she loved was so careless about everything that she would lose him for good. For good now. When she left that day, my father had turned to me. She's sorry she ever met me, isn't she?
Sorry, there's planes going by outside. I was trying to mute myself, but they won't stop. So can you imagine why this story reminded me of Gail's parents at all? Anyone? So let's talk about it. What this brings up for you. What is it about the nature of this relationship that I would call unusual? Yeah, Rev, and then Stuart.
Well, I was going to say it's one-sided, but it's not. But it's one opinion, kind of like pitched toward, like a grenade thrown into the marriage. I mean, there's plenty of reasons to leave him for his alcoholism and his wandering eye and all that stuff. But she picks the fact that he's a slob, which is almost like beside the point.
That's funny. Yeah. Stuart?
They feel like a love-hate relationship in some ways, both of them. There's something that is being loved, but then there's something that interferes with that love. And even to maybe Rev's point, some of the things that interfere are, somewhat absurd. So in this case, because you're sloppy. In Gail's book's case, it's more about the insanity of the mother and creating scenarios that aren't true about the husband or the father. And, so it's sort of that kind of twisted relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, Cris?
I see a real steadfast love on the mother's part.
Oh, we lose you there?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, now I can.
So there's a steadfastness on the mother's part, even though she says he's a slob. And he misunderstands her comments. And she actually does love him. And it's so sad in the end that he doesn't get it. But it's just this horrible mismatch. But
Yeah.
they're bound together regardless.
What I loved, the moment that moved me the most, and I actually choked up reading it the first time, was when he says, let's put best friend, first ex-wife, no, wait, best friend. And what I love about both this couple and Gail's parents is that it's like a willingness to love someone despite the messy, unfortunate things that keep them from being perfect. There's this like, well, yeah, you're screwed up, but you're important to me. And that there's a tenderness in that I find very moving, like the ability to look past people's shit. And it doesn't mean you have to put up with it. She divorced him, but yet you can still be close to one another. I thought that was profound, Yeah, Cris and then Natani.
I just want to say it's really realistic. My mom has had the same boyfriend for 40 years, and they lived together for 6 months 40 years ago, or 39 years ago. And mom's like, nope, I can't do that. But they've been together for 40 years, and it works because they don't live together.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
It's
true. Yeah, Natani.
I like and understand these relationships, and it was really heartwarming. I like seeing couples who are not together and it becomes a friendship, almost a sibling kind of nitpicking at each other, and they can be around each other and support each other, but they can't live together for whatever reason. And I actually really liked the relationship between Gail's mom and her father, despite how nutso her mother made it. It was this he's like, I just love you as you are. And that's that's what love is loving somebody despite how messed up they are and how
Right.
imperfect they are, and loving
Right.
the whole of them.
I love that too. I mean, and also I think that her father could see the delusional side of her as not her, as not truly who she was. It didn't mean, again, that he was going to put up with it, but he also was, I think he was still in love with her. They couldn't get past the delusional stuff right to the end. Yeah, Stuart.
As we were talking about this, when you think of relationships, it's interesting from my perspective is that from my experience, most loving relationships have varying degrees of tolerance.
Mhm.
And these are two examples of extremes of where there is a loving relationship. However, there are things that are getting in the way, but not to the point where you have to separate and never talk with one another.
Right.
Some relationships obviously get to that point, but
Right.
it's typical in relationships, there are degrees. And if there's
Right.
an underlying love, it's just a matter of how do we deal with all those nuances in each of the partners.
True. My parents are a lot like that. They split up when I was 2, but they had met when they were 16 and 17, and they were a deeply forged part of each other's life from New York when they came out here. And they remain friends my whole life. They still are. They would probably describe themselves as best friends if put to the test. Like when my mom fell on some hard times, like my dad was the one who my mom's remarried. Like when she and her husband fell on hard times, my dad stepped up and has offered to help. So it's fascinating to me. It's also like, can you imagine how many kids would be better off if their divorced parents could do that as a result, instead of the often vitrolic name calling and shit that happens. Okay, so before we go on to talk more, because what I want to talk about today, I want to talk a little bit about the end. And I know some of you didn't quite get there. So we'll do our best, but I want to talk about sort of where the narrator is emotionally and how we feel as readers. Do we feel complete? Are there questions outstanding? But before that, I want us to do a little writing exercise. And what I want us to do is kind of inspired by one of these stories is, so this is, I'm kind of making it up as I go here. I want you to see if you can draw upon a time in your life where there's a relationship that has some gray area, that's complicated. If you can write about having two feelings at once, both love and frustration, or, like I'll give you an example. Like I've written a lot about my alcoholic godfather. He's passed away now. And he really was quite awful at times. He engaged in some really horrible behavior. But before that, as a child, I just adored him. And I spent many, 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 a lot of time with him and my godmother. And so when he died, I wrote an essay about the love that I felt as a child, and then how that got kind of changed into these other feelings, because it's just like nothing is simple, right? Nothing is black or white. So is it possible to find some gray area to write about? Like, Stuart, if I was to make a recommendation, maybe your father, but that might be too hot button issue. So if you don't feel ready for that, don't worry about it. So what I want you to get at is this complexity of feeling two, sometimes even opposing feelings or conflicting feelings about a person, an event, a time in your life, and see if you can capture some of that. And whatever and however it comes out is fine. It can be a scene, it can just be a series of musings, but see if you can enter that space for yourself. I will give us time. right, wrap up your thoughts, sentence, word. And come back online when you're ready. So I couldn't find my glasses, so I put on a second pair. Do you see where my glasses are? Ta-da! Good times. Sometimes I'll even have one in my shirt.
I love middle age so much.
It's so funny. Maybe I'll
Things
just,
get better when you're older too.
yeah, I bet. I'm looking forward to
Took
it.
that out of my mouth.
Oh, I love you guys. All right. Who would like to share what they wrote first?
I would, I'd like to. I just want to make an excuse for myself. My two boys just came in and made themselves busy over next to me, so
Oh, that's fine.
they're great. But anyway, so I have a short one, but it's fine.
Oh, you accidentally muted yourself.
I can't use the space bar and go over to my word processor.
Oh, that's what it is.
Okay, let me get that. Okay, ready. Mary Jane, tomorrow's the day your aunt and uncle are coming to see you, I said, knowing full well they were coming to take her away to a memory care hospital. Ah, they won't come. They never do. She was right. They canceled at the last minute 3 times so far, and I had to make excuses for them every time. Well, if they do, you want to be ready, right? I looked into a long, sallow face, deep, long wrinkles accentuating the weight she'd lost over the past year. I told my niece I'd put her through medical school, but she refused, Mary Jane said. In front of me was a woman who lived on $450 a month, who never finished college, and who needed the help of her niece to pay her bills. That's as far as I got.
Good. Good start. Thank you. All right. Who would like to go next? Oh, Chris? Okay. Chris, then Stuart, then Susan.
My father shows up the day I get the application for college in the mail. He's been gone. Hold on, I can't see the whole document. Okay, my father shows up the day I get the application for college in the mail. He's been gone to I don't know where for almost a year. He left us to fend for ourselves with our mother. Can I help you with that? He asked, reaching for the envelope. I clutch it tightly. I am enraged. My lungs devour air in percussive puffs. I mutter, no thanks, and go into my bedroom. How dare he just show up and think he can act like my dad again? A stranger now, the person who betrayed my mom and the 4 of us. He does not seem like the man who built a custom octagonal window for my bedroom, or who hung my bed from the ceiling by ropes because that's what my 12-year-old self wanted. The man who built the windmill on top of the roof to grind the flour for the bread he baked for our family, that man no longer existed. I forgave him much later after my fury subsided enough to see that he was the dreamer, the nurturer of the family, not my mom who could see only herself.
Wow. Wow, that was great. That was like a flash essay. For real. That's a thing you can publish, you know. The publication I read that piece from is called Brevity, and they take short essay and fiction as an FYI.
Oh, brevity.
Yeah, Brevity, which I love. All right, Stuart, I'd said could go next.
Okay. How can you ever get oil and water to blend together? You don't. The chemistry just will not work. My relationship with my father was like a big barrel filled with oil and water, and unfortunately for me, I was the water upon which my father's oil floated. The darkness and weight was always there. At the bottom of the barrel, I sat looking up to occasionally see some light filtering through the dark sludge as the barrel violently shook when we were disagreeing on one of the many rocks that were thrown into the barrel. After many years, I started to understand my father and even felt sorry for him. His life had not been great, and he was doing the best he could. In fact, he probably thought he was protecting me, keeping me under his guard. While emotionally devastating for me, I finally escaped. When he had to part a small opening and let me go, it was time to go to college. I jumped out of the barrel, never looking back. But years later, I was able to reconcile the relationship we had by learning all the things I did not want to be.
Nice thinking. I like that. Thanks, Stuart. All right, Susan, I said you could go next. You're still on mute though.
Okay.
We lost your camera. There we go.
No idea.
Yep.
Okay. I feel great gratefulness and jealousy at times toward my daughter's adoptive mother, Susan.
I lost
Gratefulness.
sound, you guys. Sorry, hang on. I'm sorry, Susan. I lost your first couple of sentences because my computer went weird.
I feel both gratefulness and jealousy at times toward my daughter's adopted mother, Susan. Gratefulness for taking on mothering someone else's child in such a wonderful and perfect way. She was a natural from the beginning, from the very moment that she met my daughter in the neonatal ICU. I am also jealous of her at times for being there with my daughter constantly, and also that my daughter called her mama. I understand that these feelings are natural, and I thank God for my ability to handle it.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you. I hope you're going to do some more writing about that.
Oh, yeah.
Good. All right, Natani.
You are my strength and my insecurity, my reason for questioning myself and whether I will ever measure up. You protect and destroy, you envelop and push away. Eyebrow raised at someone else means I escape the harshness of the outside world. Eyebrow raised at me means that harshness is my world. My first memory of you was violent. I'm more afraid of you than anything else. I'm more afraid of life without you than with you. The familiarity of abuse, the comfort of knowing your monster, the safety in knowing how far you will go and knowing you know when to stop. My view of myself is wrapped up in you. Your vision of me and how I fail or measure up. That view changes as others know me, see me, and sometimes I seek intimacy with those who judge me harshly, critically, because it feels like warmth, like protection, like you. You are proud to parade me around when I look the way you expect me to, when I say things you can say came from you. You hide me when I decide to test your very conditional love, when I push back with a saboteur's determined failure. You hide me from yourself. You know I see you and through you. Your last breath is a relief, an inhale rather than an exhale. You suck in the grief and hold it with you forever.
Oh, I got chills when you were reading that. Wow, thank you. All right. Also, since I asked you guys to write painful things, remember self-care after class. and during also. Welcome to take a water break, a screen break. Rev. Oh, and you're muted.
I thought I was unmuted all this time. Oil and water. My father was the dreamer, full of fancy stories filling a giant vacuum in my childhood. My mother was anger, always picking apart family situations, searching hot buttons, how to start a war. When I'm much older, married in fact, struggling in my own relationship, mother leaves for the summer to visit her parents. Dad self-entertains with another woman. When mother finds out, she's devastated. She looks at me for some understanding. What am I supposed to do? Forgive him? They celebrate their 45th wedding anniversary before mother sinks into the abyss of Alzheimer's. And he takes care of her till the day she dies with his girlfriend.
Nice. Thank you, Rev. I would like to suggest that this gray area and complexity and conflicting feelings is a source of very interesting material, also often painful. So again, caveats for how you take care of yourself around writing it, but it's at the intersection, right? And it also kind of goes back to this conversation we had, I think it was last week or the week before, about how do we write about difficult people and difficult times in our life. And I think part of it is that we have to show both, all the conflict or all sides. I hate both sides for obvious reasons. We have to show the many facets of these moments and these people in our lives. So if you're going to say that someone was abusive, you have to show that. And I think Natani, you did such a great job even in that prose piece of pointing out there's love and desire to be held and closeness and familiarity, even as there is fear and harm, and those things coexist. And it's the coexistence that is powerful. And also I think that enables us to see people as real and whole people, and also to show that vulnerability that we need to see from the narrator on the page. Like, you know, if we only ever see it was easy or it was hard, then we're missing something. A writer I know named Alice Anderson, who's actually, her memoir is also wonderful, but it's in my stack of books about difficult subjects. So it's sort of a leaving an abusive marriage sort of story. But oh shoot, what was I going to say about that? My brain is really all over the place. Oh, she said something that I wanted to repeat. Oh, I know. So much of the story is about the abuse and the leaving, and her agent was like, you know, you have to write the scenes where you fell in love with him, right? And she was like, oh, great. Because if we don't see that, it's not going to have as much impact on the other end. It's just going to be villain. So we have to see the love and the appreciation and the, you know, the great parts in order to appreciate the opposite end. There was another book in my mind that I was thinking has a similar example. Anyways, I think that that's just something we have to strive for in our work, is to keep that gray area going. Do you have a comment, Rev?
Yeah, a therapist of mine once told me that, you know, if something is all bad, then it's easy to leave. If something is all good, then it's easy to stay. It gets difficult when it's intermittent.
Right.
When it's good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, and then you never leave. I mean, it's crazy making.
And to be honest, I think most childhoods are like that there's some level of, it's good for a while, it's bad, it's good for a while, or the abuser apologizes and comes crawling back. Or even if you aren't abused, like I grew up in a house with an alcoholic mother, you know, there were times of sobriety, times where she had it all together, you know, and she was great. And then times where she didn't, you know. What do you remember the times that you didn't? Yeah, Susan.
That's why I feel like I need to write about the beginning with Steve,
Yeah.
Christian's birth father, so the reader can understand why I was with him for 3 years.
I think you're right. You do have to write about that time. You know, why were you drawn to him? And even if he was somebody that today you would never choose, the person that your narrator was at that time did choose him. So who, it also tells us who your narrator was, right? If
Right,
we made choices that we weren't proud of, it's like, yeah, but they like, one of the things I've written about extensively is I went through a shoplifting phase as a child, pretty intense one. And, you know, while I didn't get caught shoplifting, I got caught stealing other things with a friend. So, you know, it was acting out. I was acting out a lot of trauma I didn't understand, you know, but if I, you know, so I have to put that on paper. And part of it was to understand it myself. And part of it was to be like, if I'm going to talk about, oh, my screwed up parents, well, I also have to talk about the behaviors that I engaged in response to that, you know? So I think it's just, there's complexity that we have to explore. Yeah. Peggy.
I think the difficulty in writing is that sometimes you hold those two feelings at exactly the same instant.
Mhm.
And Hollywood would like us to think there's this unhappy beginning and then there's this wonderful thing that happens and then the happy ever after, or that you can't hold on to two feelings at the same time. And I think that, like, when I read a book where they show that, you know, I think Gail's book did that really well. You're holding on to two exact same opposite things and acting on both of them at the same time.
I think that's very accurate. And it's something I usually teach in my fiction class, but I talk about this idea that we have, like if you think of a color wheel and each kind of primary emotion is like a color. And then if you start adding in those other more complex emotions, so you've got happiness, like for instance, when someone's angry, we're never just angry. Like sometimes it's because we're hurt or we've been humiliated or we're actually afraid, you know, but anger is what we go to because it's easiest, but what's underneath it. So it's like learning to excavate that subterranean feeling below. And then, like you said, demonstrate it is you create more interest, I guess, in the reader. And it feels more real. You know, that's the hard part is how do I recreate these experiences I had in a way that the reader can access them and feel like it's a real person that's on the page. And I think that's one of the ways. Yeah, Natani.
That's
And
why it
then-
was so
and then Rev.
important that Gail talked about how she faked a lot of her illnesses as a child, because that was her response to her mother loving her as a sick person
Yes.
and getting attention as a sick person. And if we didn't have that, it would just be her mother's Munchausen by proxy or whatever was going on with her mentally, and it wasn't how it actually affected Gail. It can't just be, it hurt me. It has to be, this is how it manifested.
And to me, that's the essence of the phrase show, don't tell. Like
Yeah.
what that means is, okay, you're going to tell me that your mother did this thing to you. Now actually put it in scene and show me how that manifested. You know, I always say demonstrate that. Rev, you'd had a comment?
Yeah. I mean, when I started my memoir, I realized that in order for the stakes to be high enough, you had to fall in love with the man that I married the way I did, you know, and see him through that childish, you know, those childish glasses that, you know, and yeah, I mean, without falling in love, you can't appreciate what comes after.
Right. And this goes back to this voice of innocence thing we've discussed, right? So what we're doing is we're putting ourselves back in the moment of an experience, and instead of trying to filter it through our adult eyes or our now eyes, we have to try and present to the reader, this was my mindset at the time. And we most effectively do that by writing scenes where we are in the moment with that character or that narrator. But yeah, it's the voice of innocence to me is simply the voice of the narrator experiencing things as they happened to the best of our memory. And then the voice of experience comes in and says, what I know now is that was unhealthy, but you know, at the time, yeah, Stuart.
Yeah, this is really helpful. I'm finding it, the discussion, because it's not just about how do you write, but it's about understanding relationships, and relationships are not black and white.
Right.
There are two ways. And so in learning how to write about relationships, and that's why creating a scene and so forth, as you're saying, I think is important. It's important to look at the relationship from all different angles. And, you know, I'd almost take it to the extent of saying, if you're talking about a relationship, whether it be with a parent, a spouse, or whatever, also look into and Gail did this, I think, well, too, is look into other people. siblings or friends
Oh, yeah.
or relatives, and how do they enter into how they're viewing the relationship or the individual who you're talking about? Because it is much more complex, and I think we tend to focus on one dimension and not all of
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. And I think partly it's like we're trying to remember what happened so we can get stuck in the events. It's like when you enter it, you have to think about what happened, what was I thinking, what was I feeling, how was I behaving, and show all of that on the page. It's no small feat. And then how were the people around me, and then what I liked in that short piece that by Amy Monticello is she says at one point, I imagine my mother's reaction was blah, blah, blah. And so there she's avoiding being omniscient, right? She can't know what her mother felt. So sometimes we have to use those kind of devices too. I don't know what my mother thought, but in that moment, I imagine, or she was behaving in a way that told me she was angry or something. But, there's so many little tricks and tools we can use to access all of this. I do think it's a good exercise to repeat, which we've done a few weeks prior, I think, to imagine, to rewrite a scenario from the perspective of someone else who wasn't you, like a sibling or a parent. And partly to see if you gain information that might have been in the peripheral part of your subconscious, that you're like, if I looked at this from my sister's eyes, what would she have said about it? And then be like, oh yeah, you know what? Because it might offer you information about your own narrator as well, right? Or a family dynamic that hasn't quite made it onto the page. So I do encourage you to, even if you don't write them, to just think about the other players in the scene. Back to my story about my godfather, I actually wrote a few different essays, one while he was still alive that I imagined he'd never read, because it was kind of pre-social media, and I had a blog, but so what I did is it got published somewhere and I linked to it on my blog, and I just forgot that he could see them. So he was not happy with what I wrote about him, and he called me a lot of names as a result. But I was like, years later, I thought, well, it was a very one-sided essay, and it does only show the bad stuff. Like, I wrote it when I was young and angry. And, I was like, okay, so then as I got older and I thought more about the complexity of the relationship, I was like, I need to write about the complexity. I didn't just hate him always, right? So these are, and also about ourselves too. I think it's an interesting exercise to sort of see if we can come up with what we perceived about ourselves at different times. So it's, again, trying not to filter everything through the now mind, but like if you're writing about yourself at 15, and today you're very confident in yourself. Well, I bet you weren't at 15. So what was that 15-year-old's mindset, and how is it different from yours today? And can you enter it and try to capture some of those feelings? If you have journals, that makes it easier. But not necessarily, because a lot of my journals are really stupid. They're all about boys I had crushes on that didn't like me back. I'm like, I wasted a lot of hours writing this down. I was like, I can never show this to my child. On the other hand, he'd probably be relieved to know that, of the inane things that go through your mind as a teenager. So, okay. So I do want to talk briefly about the end for those of you who did get to it. And I guess I really want to talk about the epilogue more than the end.
That's the one part I didn't read.
Oh, guys, I'm almost thinking I might need to read part of it to you. Let me just look here. So in the epilogue, she goes back to the place where her mother was found. And it's just a apartment building, right? And she had emailed, somehow she'd gotten the email of, I don't know if it's like the manager there or just someone who lives there a year prior, and said, can I come? I'd like to come and see this place. And the woman never wrote her back. So she just shows up one day with flowers she's going to leave, I guess, at the location. And she ends up having this interaction with this woman. And the woman reveals to her, let me see if I can get to this. She says, well, first the woman is kind of a little curt and kind of short with her. She says, I didn't know what to tell you, she says. The residents here were scared. They thought she was homeless. They didn't feel safe. I am suddenly hungry to hear her story. Every nerve in my body is primed for it. I have been so stuck in my own version of my mom's death. The prospect of hearing another angle opens new space inside me. But I tell them, no, she was an elegant lady with a scarf and a family. She sweeps her hand down her body. as if showing off a magnificent shawl. And they tell me their hearts hurt for her, for you. I nod, tears streaming down my face. Nodding seems to be all I can do. I light a candle for her there, she says, for her peace. So then she goes on, I'll read just a few more paragraphs. Wow, I say, still nodding, my hand now on my chest. Thank you. The landlords, they're Chinese, she says. And I wonder if her family is Chinese as well. They brought in a Buddhist master. I don't believe it, but they wanted him to clear the space. All of this, the candle, the Buddhist master, feels like food the way my body is taking it in. I can almost feel my blood sugar spike. I need this. I need this story. He told them the light led her here, she says. Not like lights, but light. She makes another gesture, like she's pulling taffy out to her sides, and I somehow know just what she means. I'm not sure I believe it either, but who knows? Okay, so I love this whole exchange with this woman who first is kind of like, why are you coming here to talk to me? And then she ends up revealing that they had, thought about the residents of the home, of the apartments had thought about her, sent her prayers, and had lit candle. This woman had lit candles for her, which I think is really beautiful. And then a couple pages later, as they're kind of walking through the place, Gail writes, she makes a gesture as if she is closing double doors with both hands, but there is just a single door on the screen. It is white and it glows, a luminous rectangle in a sea of gray, the light that led her here. I started like choking up when I read that. Anyways, I felt, so I don't know, how many of you did actually get that far? Okay, half of you did. All right. So for me, I felt like, once again, Gail was being very strategic and conscious in her choice of imagery. And she's ending this book as she wants to end it, right? Where she wants you to feel this story has ended. I don't know if that's where it really ended for her, if it really was that freeing and beautiful. But as from a craft standpoint, I think it's really effective and powerful and beautiful, right? So she's leaving us on a feeling, I think I would call that, if not hope, a sense of grief not being as heavy as it was in the beginning, right? So we always talk about this transition for the narrator. They have to start somewhere and end somewhere different. So for those of you who got that far, did you feel like she was in a different place by the end than she was at the beginning?
Yes.
Yes. Any other thoughts about Susan?
It was really refreshing for me, having to recently gone through my mother's death. I found this book to be so refreshing.
That's great. Yeah, it's cathartic, even if you haven't had the same experience as her in some ways. It could also be upsetting if you've dealt with suicide in your family or life. But I agree that it has a cathartic kind of quality.
Right.
Anyone else have thoughts on the ending? Or one thing too, I wondered is if anyone felt that there was anything left outstanding for them, any questions that they had that she didn't answer. Stuart.
So I just went back and skimmed it because I had read it so long ago, but my reaction was, I thought she did a great job of bringing closure to the whole story. And she did it in a way where she was seeing things in as positive a way as she possibly could. So, I mean, it wasn't just some garage in an office building. It was an apartment that, felt better. The people were okay people, and the colors of some of the furniture and so on and so forth. And then she ends it with the story about the Mayans believing suicide by hanging was an honorable way to die. Mm-hmm. And so my sense was this was a way for her to do one final pass, get closure in the most positive spin you could possibly for a terrible situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that too. Natani?
I think with adults who were abused kids, we're really good at compartmentalizing, and this is a good demonstration of that.
Yes.
And how sometimes for our own sanity and other people's comfort, we can tie things up in a pretty bow. And that doesn't make the bow any less valid. It doesn't make the experience of the light that was described any less valid or the comfort any less valid, but that doesn't that's in this compartment. It
Yeah.
doesn't remove the stuff that
Mhm.
was done in this compartment. But I
Mhm.
think she demonstrates that really, really well in this book.
I think that's a good point, and that's the feeling I came away from it with was this has been messier than you get to know as a reader. I'm showing you what I want to show you. And I know that now more after having heard her talk to us and say, yeah, I had to feel my anger first before I could even write this. But it's, and so I guess then let's ask ourselves, like, what is the function of tying it up that way? What does it do for us? Yeah, Natani.
It's healing.
Mhm.
It's healing for her. It's healing for the reader. It's healing for people who've experienced this before. It shows us how we can do that and how
Mhm.
we can put things in a nice bow and how we can feel better about things and how we can look at things from her perspective and the mother's perspective and the perspective of these residents were affected by it too, and
Yeah.
how they had to heal from it, and how that pebble in the pond ripple effect of everybody's actions, but the healing can work the same way.
That is a great point, because what I also noticed she did is she even though it's very brief, she thinks about whomever found her mother and how that probably left trauma on them. And I really appreciated that she did show that kind of wider, like you said, that ripple effect, that it's not just one family that's affected, Yeah, powerful. Yeah, Stuart.
I just thought of something as we were talking, and I don't know if this fits perfectly, but it dawned on me that the ending was acceptance. So it's sort of like she's taking us through her process of grieving, through the 5 stages of grief, and ultimately getting to the ultimate place of acceptance, and hopefully going forward from there as opposed to continuing going backwards.
Yeah, that's true. And I think acceptance is such an interesting word if you think about it, because it doesn't necessarily mean you don't feel pain anymore. It's more like you've learned to live with it. And I've heard grief described as something where grief doesn't get smaller, your life just gets bigger around it. And I love that image, because I think that's really true, that you learn to negotiate it, but you don't really, it never goes away. And I think and that's why, like for me, I actually was the saddest, I had the most emotion at the end when she's feeling the most closure, is when my grief arose. And I think that's another beautiful, like, I think it's also, there's relief in the idea that maybe we're not forever going to live with that cement. I think she even says, I always thought grief would be like a heavy bag of sand or something that I'd carry forever. And that maybe instead it can be lighter than that, which I thought was powerful. Rev, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll bring it to myself because, I don't have enough of the details of the book. I'm still struggling with finishing the book, but, I knew that I wasn't going to write this book, which, in my book about getting a divorce and being angry and all that, until compassion set in.
Yeah.
Until I could understand why he did the best that he could. What were his limitations that caused the relationship to be the way it was. And I think that's exactly what she's doing with her mother. I mean, it's a very difficult situation. And, I think I probably have yet to do it with parts of my mother, but there's more of an understanding. I have somebody that's close to me that just wrote a book about a horrific situation, but she writes it out of anger. And she hasn't reached she's still young, but she lives in the rage, and the book shows how she lives in the rage. And I couldn't finish it. I had to put it down and move away because it was too much. And I knew the story and the situation, firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, I think
if this, yeah.
Sorry, I mean to interrupt.
No. Just if there's not that forgiveness and that turning of around, and having the compassion, then it's like you're not growing.
I think the key with any story is showing change, and it doesn't have to be tied up in a bow change, but it has to be that the narrator has made some meaning out of it, even if the meaning is that there's no meaning. The narrator has to process what they've gone through in a way that the reader goes, okay, I see. But I do think that's true. Although I will say, I think you can get away with writing from a place of rage as long as it's not the whole book, that there are places for that. where there is no other more coherent emotion. But like you say, it just can't be, if it's the entire story, then maybe the reader will have a difficult time with it. But I do think there is a place for that within the story. There's a place for all of the emotions, but it's,
Yeah, I didn't want to wait for the end to see if
yeah,
she
no,
was going to
I
just,
hear what you're
you
saying.
know, do the one note.
But she's probably
video.
writing that for herself at this point. You know, she
No,
has
no,
to
no,
write
no,
the
it's
rage.
published.
Oh, it's published.
It's published. Yeah.
Can I ask what the book is?
No,
You can email me.
I'll tell you privately.
Okay, because it's someone you know. I mean, I recently read a memoir that has a lot of
Yes.
intensity, but I guess some people have called it rage, though I didn't experience it as rage. And I still was I was riveted, but there was some redemption too. Yes, Peggy.
I have a different view of rage.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is that I spent a lot of time in therapy, learning how to, he said, drive it like a Cadillac. Like you don't just, you have to be very careful how you drive it. And that was maybe 15 years ago, but that has really changed my relationship to it. I'm not afraid of it. I just, yeah, I am afraid of it if somebody's attacking me.
Right.
But I've added it to my arsenal of feelings, and that's been a whole new part. Yeah, Cris, I see you nodding, and I really feel like that is, we aren't there yet, but I love the last chapter because I feel like she did the same thing. But when I started this class, or maybe the last class, I was listening to the autobiography of Malcolm X, and that is full of rage, and it just made me really feel and bring his anger. He's dead, but so that his anger has to come through his words.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I loved it. And so taking it back to Gail's book, I think there's another book coming from her when she gets there. She's not there.
Maybe. Or maybe she selectively chose not to share. See, I think she selectively chose not to share that other book.
She said she
and she's
did.
written quite a lot of other things, other
Yeah.
novels, and that I think she's channeled some of that into. Like she wrote this book about the Countess of Bathory, who basically murdered young women. And I was like, that's where the rage went. That's where it went. It's beautifully written, but once again, like it got funneled elsewhere, I think.
I'll have to read it.
Oh yeah, it's really great. Anyways, so I don't want to take too much more time away from Chris's critique, but it's just to show there's even though we keep talking about the book, we keep finding new things to talk about within the context of it, which I really love. And I think it's just a really good example of how to write about someone very challenging situations in a way that makes you think, that makes you feel, that makes you come away with a sense of meaning made, and that doesn't feel too tied neatly up in a bow, because you can't undo someone's death, So thank you for being willing to read it, because I know it's very intense content. And I can't seem, when I'm coming to the realization is that unless it's like I don't read enough memoir that widely to know, but most memoirs seem to touch on painful things. And maybe that's why we write them, because we need to get that out of ourselves. I'm sure there are some comedic, funnier ones out there, but so I just kind of like pre-apologizing, like even the one I've picked for our next one, I was like, oh, this one's not light either. Sorry. But what I was saying before some of you logged on earlier is that what we'll do with the next book, which is a memoir in essays, is that we'll probably only address like one essay a week out of the book. So I'll be picking, and you can vote if there's one you just loved and you want to talk about it. But I will ask us to read the whole book if we can. We won't have, it'll be easier to address, because I'm partly interested in not just the content, but the form, right? So I want to talk about how each of her essays is actually its own little creation. And we might look at some of those forms for our own work as well. Okay. Just a really quick 2-minute bathroom break, and then we will meet back here to talk about Cris. Oh, come on, Jono. There's a baking here too. Yeah, I had some. Yeah, help yourself. I might have a little more, but All right, y'all, I'm back. I don't know how long that was. Could have been like a minute and a half. All right, let's see here. So I've technically had to check in for jury duty since last Friday, and every day it's like, check back tomorrow. I guess that's better than being called. It feels like the endless jury duty check-in.
My daughter's doing the same thing this week.
We're probably in the same batch.
Mm.
I had postponed mine the first time I got it because I was trying to arrange it around my vaccines. So it hadn't occurred to me, like, what do I do if they want me to check in on my vacation? Oops, I forgot.
I learned,
Yeah.
I learned something that when I had jury duty last fall, actually I had to postpone it once, and then they give you a chance to choose some.
Yeah.
So I chose the week of Thanksgiving.
Mm.
That turned out great.
And they didn't ever call you. That's brilliant.
Well, you think about it, how many cases are they going to really start on the week of Thanksgiving?
That's really kind of brilliant.
I'm hoping
Yeah, I
that
didn't have that luck. I had May dates to choose from, but you know how it goes. So Cris, would you read the first couple of paragraphs out loud for us?
I'm unprepared.
I'm sorry, because I
There.
haven't been doing it regularly.
Well, let's see. I just have to find it. Oh, I know where I can find it. I'm using Scrivener.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just have to figure out how to use it.
I've tried my.
Why don't you look in the email that Jordan
I've got it.
Oh no,
Okay.
I don't know how to use it. Oh, you mean her?
I got it.
She got.
I'm just slow.
We can wait.
The couple paragraphs. The boulder lifts me above the valley, which spreads out below me. Quilted blocks of town, forested mountains, and grassy hills. I can see the roof of my house and the neighbors' roofs too, dots of gray and beige between the treetops. Downtown is delineated by the I-5 freeway, which foots Grizzly Peak Mountain. The abandoned cabins where we drank ourselves sick, the quarry whose ice-cold water we flung our glittering teen bodies into, Dave, the horse trader's pasture, my friends' bedrooms and basements, and the inner park all hide beneath the scenery. These places will haunt me for decades.
Nice. Okay. Who would like to start talking about what they loved what was awesome. Natani.
Hi, Chris. The heat for me, I'm just going to read some of my notes here. When the narrator allows the emotions to write the descriptions, because that's when they become really gripping. And reading the ending made me want to read the beginning, which is something that I do as a reader. I'll open a book and I'll read that first paragraph. If I like the rhythm, I'll kind of go randomly to the middle. Do I still like the rhythm? And then I'll go to the end. And if that last line doesn't grip me, I want nothing to do with the book. And the last page would make me want to read the book. So this was beautiful when you slide into your it's a love letter to goodbye, a love letter to your former life, a love letter to a new beginning. I like the narrator's feelings about the relationships with nature and Oregon, and it feels soft and vulnerable, and then the reader feels it too. And my favorite line, we mistook beer, whiskey, and pot for sacraments and used speed and ecstasy to add color and shine to our gray loneliness. That was like chef's kiss beautiful. I really, really loved it. I don't know how you would make it longer. Like I always say when I like something like this that I want more. So if you were going to add more, I would say more of these emotional descriptions of when the narrator thinks about that time in their lives and the beauty behind it and the beauty behind things that we might not think are necessarily beautiful. Some people might not think that line that I found so captivating would be captivating. They think, oh no, teenagers are doing drugs. But when you describe it that way, those drugs clearly didn't harm your brain enough to say beautiful things. So I just thought it was a really, really nice ending to what I hope will be a book that we could all read someday. So thank you.
Thanks, Natani. Stuart, and then Susan.
So I'm going to repeat some of what we just heard. That's part of the problem with not going first, but in a slightly different way. For me, the heat, which is similar, I think, to what we just heard, but the heat was the emotions. The emotion just kept coming out and leaving the past behind, one final goodbye and looking to the future. And it was a watershed time in the narrator's life. And I could feel as the reader, the moment, the descriptions of the environment are visceral. I mean, you sort of feel yourself in the moment and what was the past being summarized and now looking towards the future. And one of the lines, and I think for me at the end, as a scrub jay yelled from somewhere nearby, I reflected on my parents' friend Sandy, who shook me awake with the words, "Is this really what you want to be doing with your life?" And so, it just, I felt I was there in the moment with the reader. And going back and hearing about drinking ourselves sick and so on and so forth, all we're pretty present. I could see it and feel it, not just read the words. A couple of things that I found a little bit confusing sometimes, and it might have just been me, but at the start when I was reading and said delineated by the I-5 freeway, and for me, all of a sudden, I was thinking LA, I don't know, or going from here to LA, and so I sort of disoriented, and then I got back into, oh, we're not in California. And then there was, let's see here, there was a section that I would have liked to know more about, and this is the section about adjusting to life with its homework essays and so forth. The last time I was in public school was in 7th grade. At 12, I rebuild and so forth. And I was sort of, wondering, and maybe this is in the other parts of the memoir, but what happened, before from 12 to 17 or 17, 18 or whatever it is. And so maybe that's in there somewhere, but as part of the ending, I was sort of wondering if it's not, what happened. And so I guess that's in general just saying, similar to what I think Natani said, is that more of this emotion, more maybe even details would be great. But I really enjoyed reading it and look forward to, as we say, reading the whole thing. Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Stuart. All right, Susan, I had said you could go next.
Okay. I thought your attitudes were excellent, and I just, the heat for me was just your description of the surroundings. I was there, you know, and the line I love was your phrase, hope has replaced desperation. Desperation. I love that.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Who would like to go next? Peggy?
Yeah, I agree with Susan that the heat for me was in the descriptions. I kind of felt like I wanted to just bathe in them like you sunbathe. They were so beautiful and so perfectly chosen, so evocative that I was just mesmerized. And I wrote, I think my comment was left at the end that I would not change a thing. I just felt like I was reading a published chapter, and without ever, just it was just so perfect the way it was. And yeah, I'm in awe. I'm in absolute awe. That's about all I can say.
Thank you, Peggy. All right, Rev?
I wish I'd read the book, because then this is like a tasty morsel that comes after you go through the whole story, and you can say the aha. But it's certainly a beautiful love story. I mean, love letter, to a goodbye letter, to life, the life that was, her life that was, the narrator's life that was, and we've missed it, and we're coming to the conclusion and why she says goodbye. So the description was definitely what sang through this piece, and I'm just looking forward to going back and reading the story.
Thanks, Rev. Well, Cris, I also came to the conclusion of I hardly wanted to change a thing when I came to the end of it. And I was able to really put myself in the mindset that this would be the last thing I was reading. And while I've only read snippets of your story, I felt like I knew I had a taste of what your narrator might go through. And the voice and the tone and the language felt very different to me than pieces from the beginning. So I felt like you really did a nice job of conveying just through the very word choices and imagery that your narrator has changed. And I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but it felt very, there was a wholeness to her that I could feel she had integrated a lot of trauma and pain, and that she was ready to let go. But even still, there was a nostalgia for what she was leaving behind. And I really loved it being grounded in nature. Something about that. And the particular use of imagery, the images that your narrator uses to describe, to describe the particular scene around her is just, there's so many sentences I just wrote beautiful as I highlighted it. Let's see if I can pull a couple up here. That's interesting. Did some of my comments not save? I think that my comments didn't save. Oh, wait, sorry. It says a newer version exists. That was freaking me out. Okay. But even, yeah, the scrabbling for meaning and belonging that happened there also lie concealed. Psychic wounds pock my cells. I'm just the same one that Natani read. I love so much. The gray loneliness in particular. What a great term. Hope is replaced with desperation. So many just incredible lines. And there's a meditative quality to the whole piece where I feel like I'm being brought into a slow, quiet, calm mindset. And given what I know, even the little bits I know about the narrator's life earlier on, which feels more intense and chaotic, it achieves this like an exhale that I think is really beautiful. So there were maybe just a couple places where I felt something was a little vague, but I really don't have a lot of critical feedback for you on this one. I think you did a really nice job. I think it's a really nice end piece. And as everyone else has said, I would love to read the whole book, and then I'll arrive here, I know, with the same feeling. But I think even not having read it, I just felt like, yeah, this is a great ending. And it feels hopeful, but also it feels like it captures that complexity we were talking about. It feels hopeful, but a little bit sad, but it's like a healthy sad, the way you feel when you leave home and you know it's time to leave home. And so I feel like you captured that really well. So A+. All right, your turn.
Thank you. That's very encouraging. And I'm glad that you got really the land saved my life, my relationship with where I lived and just with nature. That's what saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
I don't think I would have gotten out if it weren't for that.
Yeah,
So
I think it comes
I'm
through.
glad that got communicated, and thank you for your comments.
Yeah. All right. Awesome work, everybody. Well, even though we aren't going to meet again next week, let's set our goals. And then so if you can all let me know if you want to continue in June. I think Kara and Cindy might be returning.
Good.
Yeah, I know. I told them both. I'm like, they miss you. They're like, really? Yes. So if you can just let me know if you're going to return, and then I will count on you. One thing I probably not for this session, but maybe the session after, is people who've taken my sort of introductory version of this. If we have space available, that I will make it, they'll be allowed to come back in. So we might get some fresh blood again, but it won't be, we will never go more than 10 people in this class. So, okay. Cris, goal for next week for yourself?
My goal is to work on the pattern, the relationship between the different parts, and look at why I'm looking for patterns right now in the relationships.
I like that. Susan?
Work on what we talked about earlier today,
Okay.
and also what the in class today with choosing the contact feeling. That was
Yeah.
good.
Complex feelings. Good. Thank you. Natani.
Just this essay.
Okay, so we're gonna talk, right?
Yeah.
And I'll help you set a deadline if you want.
Yeah.
Great. Peggy. Oh, unmute, my friend.
Oh, am I setting a goal for now or from now till June?
Well, right now it'll just be for yourself for next week, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. 2 more chapters.
Okay.
Wow.
Stuart.
My goal is to finish the revision of my first chapter and really try to make sure I understand how this whole new story format is fit together.
Okay.
And I'll save you an email. I do plan on returning.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Oh, you too, Peggy? Okay. Thank you. Rev.
I'm returning too. Am I? Yeah, I'm muted. I'm not mute. I am muted. I'm going to keep writing. I also want to talk to you privately if it's possible. You know,
Yep.
at our earliest convenience.
Send me a text and we can set up a time.
Fine, great. Yeah.
And
But I definitely and now I'm going to get back to it by tomorrow.
let me find it. So in terms of the next session, we'll start back up June 23rd, I believe. But I wanted to give you a heads up that I am doing some traveling this summer. And so there'll be a couple of missed weeks, if that will be okay with you all. So we'll start June 23rd. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. Then I'm going to be gone July 21st, and we'll go a week, and then I'll be gone August 4th. So we have like 4 solid weeks in a row. Then there'll be a couple of missed weeks, but I'm hoping that's okay. But if not, we could always start later.
It's all right. We can start early.
Okay. Susan, did you
I
have?
mean, that's my opinion.
I'll be there.
You'll be there? Okay. Awesome. Okay, good. So what I'll do is I'll send out an email like the week before we start, and then we can register and go from there. And but so the book that I picked, it's not in front of me. It's called, I sent out an email, but it's called I'm Lying, but I'm Telling the Truth. I can't remember if it goes I'm telling the truth, but I'm lying. It's one or the other. And her name is, let me put it in the chat, Bassie Ipke, I believe. Let me just double check I'm getting her name right. Anyway, so like I said, it's essays. I do hope that we'll read the whole book straight through, but we will discuss specific essays. Ikpi, I got it wrong. I'm telling the truth, but I'm lying. Okay. I'm telling the truth, but I'm lying. Bassie Ikpi. And so it is available in all places that sell books, independent bookstores and regular. If you're an Amazon reader or you have a Kindle, it's available that way too. So you should be able to get it, but independent bookstores should be able to get it just as easily. Yeah, Natani.
Yeah, I ordered mine through the Collective Oakland.
Nice.
So I'm never sure
how long it'll take to get.
That's going to come. So what do you want us to have read before first class?
I'd say the first like 3 essays is fine, because I think we'll probably be talking about one of those essays in that first week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I don't get it in time, I'll Kindle it until it arrives.
Yeah, I have a feeling I might even just start with either the first or the second essay based on what I've read so far.
Okay.
So that's all you need to have read by then.
Okay. Cool, thanks.
Yeah. All right, any other questions before we depart for a few weeks? What is today? So about a month before we hook back up. All right, well, you know where to find me, and enjoy your weeks as they get warmer, hopefully. Less of this inevitable June gloom. Maybe we won't get as much of it this year. But then again, June gloom is good because it means fire season won't start earlier. Oh, yeah. I know. All right, everybody. Well, excellent work this session. I really appreciate the book exercise. I've had a good time. I'm enjoying it. So, but if you at any time,
I liked this. That was fun. Yeah.
And obviously I want to stay connected to you guys. So if at some point you don't enjoy this process anymore, we can reinvent. Okay. So, all right. Okay, everybody. I'll see you.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Good job,
so
Chris.
much.
Bye.
Bye. See you in June.